Kremlin has said that tanks that Britain plans to sell to Ukraine will burn. Britain said over the weekend it's going to send 14 of its Challenger 2 main battle tanks, as well as other advanced artillery support in the coming weeks. But a Kremlin spokesman said they are going to use this country as a tool to achieve their anti-Russian goals. These tanks are burning and will burn just like the rest. Well, joining me now is good friend of ours, good friend of the programme, Major General Chip Chapman, for the latest on this. Chip, very good afternoon, as always, to you. Let's just focus on these tanks. What are the Challenger 2 tanks and why are we giving them to Ukraine?
Well, Challenger 2 is a main battle tank. That's been the mainstay of the British Army for nearly 30 years. It's a very capable 120mm rifled barrel, which makes a difference because most other NATO tanks have smoothbore barrels. The key thing really is a moving of red lines by the West. So to partake in mobile offensives, you need a combined arms activity, and that is both mechanised infantry, tanks, artillery, air defence, engineers all grouped together. We've already seen a movement in the mechanised infantry with both the Americans with Bradley and M113 saying that they'll provide those, the French saying that they'll provide AMX-10RC light tanks, and even the Germans are going to provide some 40 Marders, that's a mechanised infantry combat vehicle. So if you combine all those together, that gives you a all-arms capability. Now, 10 is not very many, and to do major offensives, Ukraine have stated that they ideally like, across the piece of support from the West, something like 200 to 300 main battle tanks and something like 600 mechanised infantry combat vehicles with more artillery. It's also significant at the same time, though, as we're providing the Challenger tanks, we're also providing a regiment that 30 guns of AS-90, that is a 155mm artillery piece. So both those together are something which is useful. And, of course, General Cavoli, the head of the Supreme Allied Commander Europe, did state last week that hard power is a reality. And, cyber and information are important. But if the enemy shows up with a tank, the best thing to have on the other side is a tank.
In saying that, we know that the front line, Chip, is 2,500 kilometres long. What impact do we think these tanks are necessarily going to have? And also, frankly, it'll never be enough, will it, for Ukraine? I heard the other day someone suggesting that Ukraine goes through more ammunition in one day than the United States can manufacture in a month, i.e., it's going to get to a stage where us in the West might start running out of tanks and weapons to supply.
Well, by themselves, 10 tanks won't make much difference. But when I see this partly as a catalyst for other nations providing tanks, we think that another T-72, 90 T-72s are likely to be coming via Czechoslovakia and Poland. And the thing about the productive capability is that the production and consumption mismatch is more on the Russian side than the Western side. So, for example, if you take one metric, the US defense budget, which was announced a few weeks ago, is $875 billion. That is half of the GDP of Russia. And the ability of both America and the West to outproduce Russia is significant if this goes to a long term. Now, in terms of the strategy, the provision of this sort of capability and when it grows is part of from a Ukrainian side, a winning faster strategy, whereas the Russians take the view, and it's likely that they're going to mobilize another 500,000 people, sort of all for the front, all for victory, and get to 2024 and see what happens. So you've got two contestable sides, and the Russian strategy is really more to do with, can we outlast the West if they are still supported in that industrial capacity of the West ramps up. 1.7 trillion GDP on Russia against 40 trillion on the West is a serious mismatch if we're serious about this.